Cydian, welcome to Growing Joy.
Thanks for bringing me on. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to talk to you today because I have recently moved to Florida and we have horrible tap water here. We're not even allowed to drink it. So, water quality in general has been on my mind in terms of just like health for the human body. But also, I know it's a pain point for a lot of gardeners who, buy a new house and all of a sudden are dealing with different water quality and their plants are, not as happy as they used to be. How did you become the water quality guru? Like how did you become so fascinated with water?
I'll tell you my story, but when you say the water quality guru, there's probably 50 other people that are
Hmm.
better than me. But I am a water expert. I've become a water expert through great effort, and it started with my daughter and simultaneously a tenant that I used to manage properties, and a tenant had really bad water. Like we're talking brown and smelled like rotten eggs. And so when I took it to the lab, they came back with this water's healthy. And they were just reading a little piece of paper. So I challenged them on that. I was like, this water is definitely not healthy. And then they corrected themselves. Like they said, this is within legal limits. And
Mm.
that kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. I was like, what is going on with that? So, simultaneous to that, my daughter was having skin issues, eczema. And I happened to talk to the guy who founded Pure Water Northwest. His name's Chris Pelton. He is one of those people who is better than I am.
Hmm.
And he explained to me that the EPA sets two standards for drinking water. They have a health level and a legal level. And so very frequently the labs will conflate those two. They will call the legal level the health level when they verbally like explain stuff to people. So even though that water, that brown rotten egg smelly water was within the legal level, it was outside the health level. And so they made a mistake by explaining that to me. And Chris explained that to me. And so when I was on the phone with him, I asked him about my daughter's skin, and just it just came to me to ask him, and he explained that very often he sees people's eczema improve when they get a softener.
Hmm.
And so I did that, and it worked, and I kind of was hooked. I was like, I want to be part of this. Chris has since moved on. He moved to Alaska and started a whole new company. I've taken over this company, and I had to catch up with him. So I just started studying and doing courses and going to school and getting certifications and all that stuff so I could talk nerdy about water.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Before we moved to Florida, we lived in upstate New York after living in New York City. New York City is known for having pretty good tap water.
Hmm.
And then we moved to a house that had a well. And my husband has very sensitive skin, and he started getting all of these skin issues with the well. And my hair was disgusting. I had to start using a special shampoo for the well
Yeah.
water. And then we moved back to tap water. I had never really experienced the difference in water quality in my personal hair, skin, whatever, until we experienced that well water. And it was very eye opening that something that you're drinking and showering in every day can really affect your health and your comfort level.
Absolutely true. Water is something we always are have been drinking and always will be drinking and bathing in. And so you do take it for granted. It takes something like that to happen for people to notice that water can be very different from one place to another.
Yeah. And this whole idea of legal versus health, like we blindly sometimes trust that our municipalities or whoever is in charge of the water, has our health in mind, but sometimes that's not the case. Not to like speak against the government, but
Yeah.
you
Well,
do sometimes have to do your own research for your own health when it comes to stuff like this.
that's right. The EPA really, honestly, are probably doing the best they can.
Of course.
They set the legal guideline as close to the health guideline as they possibly can,
Hmm.
but that is taking cost and other factors into consideration. So it really is a multiplier. If the water needs to be 10 times better to be healthy, you generally need 10 times the amount of real estate, and that is expensive. That would make everybody's water bill be much, much higher, potentially 10 times higher. So that wouldn't work, right?
Totally. So, how does water get messed up? How do we go from having beautiful rainwater that falls from the sky and it's, perfect. And how does that water get messed up in terms of the water that comes out of our faucets or the water that comes out of our sprinklers?
Yeah, so that's called the hydrologic cycle. And
Okay.
basically, when you were in school, you probably remember seeing a little like a visual where the rain drops on the
Hmm.
mountains and pours across the mountains, and as it comes out of the clouds, it's picking stuff up that's floating in the air. So that's the first thing, is that there is stuff in the air that it captures. Back in the day, people would call that acid rain. There is stuff on the ground, animal waste and factory chemicals and byproducts, and there's stuff that has been recycled into the river, like pharmaceuticals and forever chemicals, tons of microplastics. And then there's the entire periodic table of elements: arsenic, radium, uranium, like every single thing on that. I mean, uranium's not going to be likely, but every single thing on that can be in drinking water.
Mm.
So when it all comes to finally hitting your glass, if there was no treatment whatsoever, you could potentially have thousands of things bound to that water. Luckily, treatment does a very good job of getting out most of that. Not all of that though. And so that's why in your home, whether you're on a well or you're getting water from the city, you will get an undetermined number of things in your water that, despite the fact that the water may look good, smell good, and taste good, could still be there.
For tap water, does each city clean their water or treat their water differently, or is there a standard practice for treatment across, we'll just say for the United States?
Well, there's a standard workup, but
Hmm.
there's no, they customize it based on the water, as they should. This honestly is my criticism of most water treatment companies, is they are not customizing their water treatment, and that's because it requires a great deal of skill. So the water treatment facilities, they're all going to flocculate in some, they're going to catch like fish and debris and stuff in giant screens. Then the water past that is going to have a bunch of little floaties on. They're going to do what's called flocculation, which is where they pour in a chemical that binds stuff together so that
Mm.
it can be skimmed off, usually by robots, but in smaller municipalities, people might do that. And then they're going to chlorinate. Nearly always, 99% of municipalities chlorinate. And they're going to run it through carbon filtration, because carbon filtration has an adsorptive. It's called adsorption because it's not sucking it in like a sponge. It's sticking it to the carbon.
Okay.
Um, but the carbon has all kinds of little tunnels inside of it, thousands of tiny, tiny tunnels. So many tunnels in like a single piece, a single gram of carbon, that if you were to spread that carbon out, it would cover 3 tennis courts.
Mm.
That's how much surface area is inside a piece of carbon. So nearly every municipality in the world uses carbon because it is honestly the best go-to filtration there is. It does not do everything at all.
Hmm.
The only thing it does perfectly is get rid of chlorine and chlorine, and only certain types of carbon get rid of chlorine byproducts. But then there may be other stuff. They may want to soften the water because it's too hard. They may want to, which is going to be cation resin. They may need to get rid of some strongly negatively charged ions, positively charged ions. They might use anion resin, which is going to attract a negative charge to it. That's it. And they may go through more physical filtration as well, but every municipality is going to adjust it slightly because the water quality is going to be very different for each municipality.
What is hard versus soft water?
It's basically rocks. I mean, it's not bad for you to drink. Hardness in water is not unhealthy to drink. It's just going to affect your skin and hair, and it's going to be based on your sensitivity. Most
When you
people,
say rocks, do you mean like rock particles in the water? Like
yeah,
if water is hard, it has more rock particles in it?
that's what I mean. Yeah. Like literal calcium, magnesium that is dissolved into the water.
And then if it's soft, is it void of all of those rocks?
It has less of those. Yeah.
And is soft water what we want?
Well, that's a very tricky question, because if the water gets too soft, it can get corrosive. It can become hungry for metals. and stuff. When I soften a house down to nothing because that's what they want, I usually want to check the water ahead of time to confirm that what's called the langular saturation index is within a range that allows me to soften without stripping off the plumbing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're looking at buying a home right now and just found out it has polybutylene pipes. And that's one of the issues is that the chemicals in the water like totally strip the pipes. Oh, okay. So it's kind of like the pH scale. Like you want to find is there a numerical association with soft and hard water? Like is there a target number that you're going for?
Well, most municipalities try for two hardness.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter gets eczema from a 1 hardness though. So
Okay.
your own personal sensitivity is very important. Also, the langular saturation index is also an index of how much that hardness will leave scale. A 2 hardness with a high LSI will actually cause a similar scale buildup to a 10 hardness with a lower LSI.
Okay.
So some
Wow, there's
people,
like a lot of factors at play.
yeah, there are tons of factors at play, and I try not to make it too complex, but I do like people to know that if they just go to Home Depot and buy a softener, they may or may not be doing the right thing.
Because based off of what your specific water has in it,
Hmm.
you might be over softening your water.
Yeah, you may be making your water more corrosive. You may be making it so that plumbing or fixtures get stripped of metals that you then drink more than you would have before,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Is pH a thing here too?
Yeah, well, pH is one of the 5 factors that make up the langular saturation index, basically.
Okay.
And so it's one of the strongest factors, along with alkalinity, which is not just a measure of pH. High pH tends to be more alkaline water, but alkalinity itself is not directly related to pH. Other factors are involved in that too. So those temperature, calcium hardness, those all affect the langular saturation index, and when taken together tell us how hungry the water is or how much it's going to spit stuff out at you, basically how much it's going to offer to your plumbing.
Regurgitate, right. Is it hungry or is it regurgitating?
Exactly.
Okay, this is interesting. And hang in there with me, listeners. We're going to talk about plants, but I feel like it's easier for us to understand how this affects our bodies first before we move on to plants. So, what are the most common issues you see, not just in your region, but like around, around the country, if not the world, if you can speak to that, that are common issues that people might not understand? Oh, my eczema actually is my water quality, not a skin
Yeah,
condition that I have or something.
sure. There's basically 3 considerations any homeowner has: whether or not it's going to affect their skin and hair,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's going to affect their appliances and plumbing, and whether it's going to affect their health. The most common skin and hair issues are chlorine and hardness. And those 2 things, ameliorating them require skill and testing,
Mm-hmm.
basically, to identify how much we're talking about and then customize the solution. So that's one. There is also the plumbing and your appliances. And mostly we're worried about hardness when it comes to that, but also sometimes silica. And certain areas are going to have more silica than other. The Northwest has tons of it. The anywhere along the Cascades, Hawaii has a lot of it. Anywhere volcanic is going to have a lot of silica. So that can definitely affect things. Chlorides will also affect, they're not going to hurt anything, but they can be salts, or chlorides can be why you have water spots even if you have no hardness. Okay, moving on to health. Health is a giant consideration.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, forever chemicals are now considered being set by the EPA as having concerns in the parts per trillion. So just give you an idea of what parts per trillion is. Parts per million would be like a single drop in a couple 5-gallon buckets.
Hmm.
Parts per billion would be like a single drop in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So
Hmm.
parts per trillion would be 1,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools or a small lake.
For
A
one
single
drop.
one drop. That's
Okay.
parts per trillion. And so we don't want forever chemicals, PFAS, forever chemicals, those we want down basically to nothing. A recent study of 23 rivers in the middle of the United States found 19 of them had forever chemicals over the amount we would want
In the river's natural water.
in the river's natural water. Yes.
And that's coming from sewage, dump, like spills. Where are those coming from?
DuPont. I mean, it's Teflon, it's Gore-Tex, it's mainly fire foams. So we can't really blame a single company, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Though they've created it, they also were trying to save people's lives from fires.
Right.
So but and the newer fire foams are supposed to not have this. So, but they are also called forever chemicals for a reason. They're incredibly rugged, long chain molecules that you can burn and they don't disappear. So
Wow.
when you're in your body, you're not breaking them down.
Too, when you were talking about the silica and how there's a lot of silica in the water in the Northwest or in Hawaii, what makes it regional? Is it that there's more silica in the ground? And
Yeah.
so when it rains, it binds with whatever the rocks and earth is in those areas. And because the regions vary based on geography, the water quality varies that way?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
And you can trace it down even further. Like in the Northwest, we have it because, like 10,000 years ago or whenever it was, we had this giant glacier that was taller than skyscrapers, like pushing its way through the entire Northwest, like making mountains and creating just ripping up the soil. And then Hawaii, it's because of volcanic activity. But it's exactly right. It's regional. The Department of Ecology, for example, tracks arsenic because arsenic's on the periodic table and it also happens to be pretty much everywhere. And arsenic is in many, many municipal drinking water systems. Arsenic's definitely not healthy for you to
Wow.
drink. Yeah.
It's literally literal poison.
Yeah. But it's in a little amount. And your body is better at dealing with arsenic than it is dealing with PFAS, but it is a metal, so you're not really breaking it down. If it flushes away, it flushes away because of like movement in the body, not because you're going and specifically grabbing that metal and binding with it, unless you have like chelation or some sort of medical action that will specifically go in and pull those metals out of your body.
Wow.
So we want to throughout our life try and lessen the amount of arsenic we have. You can drink arsenic in the amounts that are in municipal waters for many years, like decades. But then at some point, it could build up to a point that that is the cause of your cancer or your organ failure. And you would never know that because it's such a slow build.
Wow.
So,
What about when it comes to plants? So you shared the common problems, the main problems you're seeing with water when it comes to the human body. What about with lawns and plants and even houseplants?
yeah, I'll talk about that. I do want to say real quick, there's a solution that's very easy for a lot of people. Reverse osmosis will solve
Right.
the PFASs, microplastics, arsenic, that kind of stuff. So
So
I just
actually, maybe before we get into plants, let's talk about what reverse osmosis is.
Yeah, I just want to not build up a bunch of fear and then have no
Yeah. Yeah,
solution
yeah,
in
yeah.
people's minds.
Huh?
So, because the water, it is good to clear it for your lifetime of drinking. Drinking water here and there with that, your body's fantastic at handling that. But reverse osmosis is basically like a thing. You can do it for your whole house, but in almost every case, that is overkill. It's
Hmm.
best to just put it on your sink, put a dedicated faucet, get the reverse osmosis that has the tank, not
Hmm.
the tankless ones, and then all your water will be massively treated, like 90 to 99.999% removal. Like it can get down to the 0.000001 micron level. RO water is incredible.
And how does it work, RO?
Well, basically, there's a filter inside that is very special, and it shunts the water into two paths
Hmm.
by making it so that there's pressure that will push metals through and various other things through to one side, but on the other side will leave water just because of osmotic pressure. Water has to remain on the other side because it is the state that everything is moving in. So the pressure will push all the stuff through to the waste side, and that waste will be dumped down a drain, and then you will have good water to drink.
Okay. Okay. So reverse osmosis is the solution. Fear not, friends. You're not just going to drink arsenic and die from arsenic poisoning. What about plants? Because, that's your garden hose, the water coming out of your sprinklers or your garden hose or however you're watering your
Yeah.
plants.
Well, every water is different, so
Hmm.
I can't speak to all water, but plants are definitely more rugged than humans are in some ways and less than others. They're obviously much more susceptible to salt, to chlorine, to pH than humans are. pH have
Hmm.
their own internal way to balance most of those things. Whereas plants are like, you're feeding me now. Am I able to instantly absorb this into my cellular structure, right?
Hmm.
So salt and sodium buildup can definitely cause leaf burn, can cause root damage, that kind of thing. And so how much salt or sodium is in salts or sodiums are in tap water, that is very variable based on the tap water. Most are pretty good though. Most plants can handle tap water. Some of the more sensitive plants, I don't remember the names of them, but they're the ones that are like long and they have like flowers at the top that are commonly sold in stores. They're really sensitive to salts and chlorine.
No.
No, it's
House plants or outdoor plants?
they're houseplants. Yeah. Gosh, what are their names?
Are they palms?
Like orchid type plants.
Oh, okay.
That's the word I was thinking. Orchid
Hmm.
type plants. Carnivorous plants are very sensitive to those things. They are more sensitive to those things than others. I'm not exactly a plant person. I'm a water
Hmm.
person. So I only knew that because I had somebody else, and then I had to just go research, remind myself what it was right now because I had someone recently who was dealing with carnivorous plants that they put in order to get rid of some bugs around a flower bed that was being affected by bugs for some other reason. So they were trying to have a natural way to kill the bugs, right?
Hmm. That's cool.
Yeah. But the water was killing the plants. So I had to come in and help them figure out what it was. I had to do research on it, figure out what the sensitivity level of those plants to chlorine and hardness and salts. And they were just their hardness apparently didn't affect them hugely, but the chlorine and the salts did for those carnivorous plants. High pH obviously prevents nutrient absorption. So I think I know you a lot of times people when they're balancing stuff for plants, they're doing their NPKs. So they're having the potassium level, the salt levels right, the potassium levels right, and they're like balancing it perfectly, right? So when we recently, well, when I say recently, it was 2 years ago, but helped a company do a grow operation. Because in Washington state, it's now legal to grow
Hmm.
marijuana, right? So this company was doing this grow operation, and what they wanted was they wanted nutrient reclamation automatically dosed back into their water so that when they're doing their NPK dosing, they don't have to keep doing that as much
Mm.
because it's recaptured. And so we had to pre-treat the water, have them do their dosing, then do their capture at the bottom, and then have an analyzer and a dosimeter dose a certain amount of that recapture back into the water automatically. And then they could test the water and then decide how much of their nutrients they're going to re-add.
Wow, that's making me remember. I grow hydroponically. I grow food hydroponically. And yeah, the pH down, like having to measure the pH of the water every week, add the pH down,
Mhm.
tinker with it always. This is very interesting. Why do salts cause leaf burn?
They cause it actually because of a similar thing to what I was talking about before with reverse osmosis, which is osmotic pressure. Leaves actually pull in the water based on their need for water, if that makes sense. Like their how full are they of water is then if they're not full enough, for lack of better words, the osmotic pressure of the water that is trying to pull in of the part of the plants that's trying to pull in the water, the root system, that will cause pressure to be resisted or absorbed based on how much is needed. Salt disrupts that to some degree. So salt will actually bind and increase the water's osmotic pressure against absorption, if that makes sense, which then can dry out the leaves effectively because they'll be quote unquote burned.
Got it. And then what about sometimes people write me in, and I experienced this when I lived in New York, when you would water your plants and then on their leaves, there would be like white residue. And
Hmm.
sometimes when I asked people, they said, oh, it's the water. It's like the calcium in the water.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be calcium. I would really have a hard time believing that that goes through that way, but it actually could be. I mean, I bet that's very plant-based,
Yeah.
but the calcium absolutely is going to be in efflorescence wherever it goes.
Hmm.
So if you have hardness, which is the calcium magnesium, and it is able to transpire through the plant and then expire through the cellular structure of the leaves, that will look white because
Mm.
the efflorescent effect of the water releasing the calcium causes all the calcium little molecules to find each other and basically create chalk, for lack of a better word.
Got
So
it. And
yeah,
so when
that
it leaves the leaves via transpiration, then the calcium gets left behind when the water
yeah,
evaporates.
yeah, that
And
makes
then what
perfect sense.
about oftentimes you see recommendations online saying if you're watering your plants with tap water to fill your watering can and leave it out for the night so that like chemicals can evaporate. Is that a
Yeah,
thing?
for sure,
Okay.
but with limits.
Okay.
So free chlorine will evaporate in 12 to 24 hours. So free chlorine is the kind of chlorine you would get from a pool store or Fred Meyer's or
Hmm.
whatever, your grocery store. I don't know what grocery stores you have in Florida, but that's free chlorine. When chlorine does its work to oxidize something, or if the municipality is not putting in chlorine but putting in a chloramine, that is a combined chlorine. That's like a dibromochloromethane, haloacetic acids, trihalomethanes, chloroforms, or even ammonia or ammonia byproducts can be in that water. And that is not going to off gas the same way. That will stay in the water bound to the water molecule. And some of that can affect plants.
Hmm.
The free chlorine is definitely more of an effect on plants. So, yes, that is a reasonable thing to do. It's not a perfect solution, but it's definitely like it's a cheap way to get your free chlorine, the most harmful part of the chlorine for plants, out of there for sure.
Because this varies city, state to state, city to city, how do you find out what's in your water? Like, do I have a municipality that has more chlorine or do I have more silica? Like, how do I find out what's in my water?
Yeah, the municipality will not test for silica. So to answer your question, every municipality is going to have a CCR or some sort of report, a community conveyance record or something where they're showing what their tests are. They also send their water to this nonprofit group called the Environmental Working Group. And so you can go to EWG Tap Water, look up your municipality in their tap water database and find a report. You can do that for your report too. You can type in your city or your municipality's name and then water report, and there will be a water report there. So those are two ways to just get free reports to what's in your water.
Generalized
Yeah.
reports.
But if you want your own report for your plumbing in your house, you'd have to pay for a test. We've got those tests on our website, purewaternorthwest.com/testing, I think. And then there's a bunch of other companies as well out there that you can just look up full spectrum report for my house or whole house water test for municipal water or for well water. Just look it up on Google and someone will basically mail you a kit. It's like usually going to be a box that's like about this big, size of a small parcel, and you'll just open it, fill the water with, follow the instructions, mail it back in, and you'll get a report in a few weeks.
And
And
then
that
based on those results, you can then decide I'm cool with the levels of everything we have, or I need a water softener. I need to treat this water in a more intense way. And then, so you mentioned a reverse osmosis machine, which you said sounds pretty localized, where it's more just for your drinking water. What are the other ways if you get, reports back that you do have too much chlorine or you do have too much whatever? What are other ways that you can remediate water issues?
Yeah, because you might want that for your whole house so that you can literally water through an irrigation system or fill it with your faucet outside. If it's chlorine, what you're going to be doing is carbon. If they are chloramines, you're going to want to use a catalyzed carbon, a catalytic carbon, an acid wash, very special kind of carbon. And you can put those in large tanks and have them be self-cleaning too. The backwash on the tank will clean the tank and make it so the tank lasts for decades rather than a year in most cases. So there's that. For hardness, you're going to want a softener. I do recommend you get a professional company to help you with that though, because they should be testing, what the balance of your water is, what the langular saturation index or LSI is of your water when you're doing a softener to make sure they're not making your water more corrosive.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you get both of those things in line, that's great. None of that's going to remove stuff like arsenic, though, or hexavalent chromium, or some PFAS forever chemicals will not be removed by that. Microplastics are not really removed by that. So, a 5-micron sediment filter will help with microplastics for 90%. You want to get rid of it entirely, you have to do reverse osmosis or ultrafiltration. And then if you want to get rid of the arsenic or chromium or any of that, you need reverse osmosis at your sink. Or if you want it for your whole house, you need anion resin. So it is very common for people to do 3 different systems in their house if they're trying to get rid
Wow.
of everything.
What about those, like, it's very popular. I've seen advertised to me a lot now, these shower heads that you can just screw on that are like filters.
Yeah, so water, those have some effect
Hmm.
for some period of time. The problem is flow through on carbon and other things requires time. So if you're got like, I don't know what it would be, a very small amount of carbon, because those filters are usually very small. So the amount of carbon is maybe 2 or 3 cubic inches, but your shower is the most water usage you have in your whole house. So you will absolutely, without a doubt, have some chlorine getting through those. That's not going to help with hardness at all. It'll completely blow past it. So it'll do something, but not a ton. For showers, you need a whole house system.
And what about for gardeners for our outdoor plants? Like, is there anything you can put on the hose, or you can, like, how would you address treating sprinklers or, hoses, garden hoses, that kind of stuff?
Unfortunately, the speed of flow, the volume through those are also still too high for any point of use thing to be really, really effective.
Mm-hmm.
They won't do nothing, but they're not doing a ton. And getting a whole house system is definitely the way to go for that. If you want it just for that garden hose, you can get that set up. Like you could call a company and have them plumb it in for just that, and then you would need less. But you would need something that's about, at least 2 feet tall and 10 to 12 inches wide.
Got it.
So,
Okay, so you
yeah.
need something, you need the big guns
Yeah.
because it is so much water that you're using to water your lawn or your garden or whatever. I recently interviewed a guy about water coherence and structured water. Do you have thoughts on like coherent water and restructuring the molecules of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So the guy who made that really popular recently is a guy at the University of Washington. I can't remember his name, but he's right in our neighborhood here. So he made this book called The Fourth Phase of Water.
Hmm.
And in the very book that people quote and use, he says when you drink the water, he's not sure how it would retain its structure.
Mm.
So this is a physical structure. It's not like some magic that gets applied to the water. When
Hmm.
he creates structured water, he's pushing the water against a special surface, a hydrophobic surface, that then makes the molecules align. Then he theorized that if you could drink this water, it would be healthier, much healthier. There is even evidence that that's true. But unless you're eating fruit, which fruit structures water too,
Hmm.
unless you're like eating fruit, which will give you a semblance of structure, like a little tiny bit of structured water in theory, there's no possible way to get structured water into your body. And then even if you're eating fruit, it's only going to retain its structure for a little bit of time in your stomach.
Okay.
There's no reason to think that that is possible to make the theoretical benefits of structured water last as it's going through the tremendous amount of turbulent motion that occurs as
Mhm.
water passes your lips and goes in your stomach and it's digested in your body. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting topic that has a lot of, a lot of new research out. So I'm very
Yeah.
curious. So, but you're into the cleanliness of water and, making sure that we're making it as healthy as possible. So, this has been so helpful and eye-opening. You do this for a living, right? In the Northwest. So if
Yeah.
anyone in the Northwest is listening and is like, "Oh, I want to do the test. Oh, I want to do, I want to do a water softener or RO." Can you share a little bit about your company and what you offer and how people can
Yes.
find you?
Yes. My name's Cydian. I own Pure Water Northwest. I do get calls from around the world at this point from people who want me to consult with them. I usually do 5-minute calls for nothing here or there,
Mhm.
but if it requires real consultation, then I'm happy to help with that as well. And then anyone in the Northwest, obviously, we can come out and actually see you.
Mhm.
I can do a lot of consulting remotely because I can just get water test sent, interpret them, suggest what is needed, send the equipment to them, and have them have a local plumber do the installation. So I can help anyone anywhere. Yep.
Do you have any interesting success stories from clients of like you went in and fixed the water? I mean, it sounds like your daughter is a success story of changing your water with her eczema, but do you have any other interesting stories?
Sure. Yeah, I have a ton. There was a lady who lives about 35 minutes from me. She had rosacea. This is another skin thing, but she had like the red kind of
Mhm.
blistery. And a softener alone, she had a softener. A softener alone didn't help that. So I had to research rosacea a little bit. And what I put in was a mixed system that had carbon, anion, and cation all in one tank. And it solved her rosacea problem. Like it
Wow.
actually made it go away, which I'm not claiming that that will happen with everyone with
Of course.
rosacea. I told her I wasn't 100% sure it would work, but my research indicated that it could, and then when we did it, it did. We had a guy who had another crazy story. We had a guy who had a naturally occurring cyanide spring, and cyanide, it's not on the periodic table. It's like something that has to happen because of plants dying
Mm.
and releasing cyanide. So it was like a naturally occurring spring that he did get his water from and his cattle drank from. He had a cattle ranch. So he bought the property, he moved all his cattle on, then he went on vacation. And when he came back, 50 of his cattle were just dead.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so we went in, we figured out what was wrong with the water. And then we had an engineer tell us it would be easier to get water from the moon than to fix the water. And so Chris at the time, who I was working with, he was like, "That's not true." So he designed something that the engineer then said, "Okay, this will work," and then he signed off on it, and we got them good water. But if that guy had not gone on vacation, that is very likely he would have died from drinking that water. It was
Whoa, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, super lucky that the cattle were kind of the canary in the coal mine, so to speak.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, such an interesting story to leave off on. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. This was really, really fun to nerd out with you about water, and we'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes if people want to learn more.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Maria.
Growing joy.